Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. My name is DV LeBron. Today, my very special guest is the congressman that represents our area in Ellis County, Congressman Jake Ellzey. How you doing, sir?
Hey, DV, how you doing, man? It's good to see you. It's been too long.
Definitely been too long. It's good to see you, sir. Thanks again for coming on the show. You've been a great friend to the show, and I do appreciate it.
Love coming on.
There's so much going on in Washington. So much. It's happening. It's constantly happening. And so I wanted to have you on to speak to your constituents because there's a little bit of confusion here and there, and there's some things coming out. And who best to hear from than the person representing them in D.C.?
Well, I hope I can clarify, but before you get into any questions, we're seeing a whole bunch of different things coming out of this administration, out of Washington, D.C. right now that we haven't seen ever. So I will provide illumination and an explanation if I can. And if I can't, we learned a few answers at the Naval Academy on I-Day in July 6, 1988. Yes, sir. No, sir. No excuse, sir. All find out, sir. And my guess is that fourth answer might be utilized several times today, but I can find out. There's a question asked that I can't answer.
Definitely. And I actually put out a little post before I had you on for your constituents if they had any questions for you. So there's a few in there that I'll include. First, since the last time I talked to you, we now have a Republican president. We have a one-seat majority in the House, I think it is. And, we have the Senate. We have all three branches of government, and we get to make our agenda the best we can because that tight majority, really small majority, makes it hard to do bills. But things are in flux. One of the things that your constituents were concerned with was DOGE. People were concerned with how he's doing things. And the other thing they were concerned with is Medicaid benefits, and veterans that reached out to me were concerned with veterans benefits. Are they going to get cut? And that's something that affects me as well. Are veterans benefits going to get cut? They let go a lot of probationary employees, all of them in the VA. And so now they're having to do more with less. And there's a lot of concern, Congressman. So can you talk about Medicaid and can you talk about veterans issues?
Well, thus far, there should be no changes to Medicaid other than the employees of the U.S. government. The benefits are not going to change at all and certainly haven't been touched at all by DOGE. DOGE is going agency to agency, finding where it can cut staff. And the easiest way to do that is to obviously go after probationary as a low-hanging fruit, so to speak, to cut down on staffing in the United States bureaucracy, which has grown by leaps and bounds. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the Pentagon, the VA, ATF, or any other agency. They've all grown to the point where they're unwieldy. And the easiest way they went was, hey, if you don't show up to work in person, you're fired, which I think, so if somebody's losing their job because they refuse to come to the office to work here in Washington, D.C., and listen, after COVID, there were a lot of folks that say, let's talk about HHS, Health and Human Services, which for the last 3 years since I've been here, that building, and I point back here because it's across the street, is empty. And nobody's there. And that's changing now with RFK Jr. But so you don't show up to work, you're automatically fired. So now, are there going to be people who are working remotely who may have been affecting veterans benefits? But you got to come to work. I'm at work. I can't work remotely. Most Americans can't work remotely, certainly after COVID began 5 years ago and ended 3 years ago. So if you're still using that as an excuse to work in Iowa when your office is in Washington, D.C., bye. You're not using the taxpayers' dollars effectively. So you're the low-hanging fruit. We'll start there and then we'll go more programmatic after that. In the case of USAID, they went after that first because Samantha Power ran such an organization that did things that I wasn't aware of, and I don't think most people were either. And so somebody might be listening and saying, but Congress has oversight. Yeah, we do. And as a committee, we could bring in somebody to discuss their programs and we can see what they're laying out. But if they're not being forthcoming about some of their programs, which the taxpayer or we may find objectionable, they just won't talk about it. So Elon Musk, who I characterize as, and I've never met Elon, So I know a lot of people who have, and a lot of people have opinions about him. For lack of a better term, President Trump appointed him to be chief auditor of the executive branch. So when we're talking about the agencies that are being affected by DOGE, the chief executive, like any new CEO coming in after a failed one, is sending an auditor after each department in his headquarters to find ways to trim the fat for a company that is in the red. Well, the United States is $36 trillion in the red. So he has found an auditor with exquisite software that has a great algorithm assisted by AI. So he's using artificial intelligence software to affect an algorithm to find fat in all the agencies that he has purview over. Now, some of these things are going to be addressed by lawsuits. And I think he may be intentionally trying to find where the limits are so that through the Constitution and the interpretation therein, the Supreme Court can say, actually, that agency has no business being the executive branch. And I really think in the long term, after just a month and a half in office, you wait down the road 6 months to a year, you're going to find some agencies that are done away with completely, just like we do in Texas. And every 2 years, they will go over a group of agencies, and then they'll do another group, and they'll go, what was your original charter? Are you doing that job? Do you still need to be doing that job? And if we don't need you to do that job anymore, it's outmoded, we will cut that agency out of the state government. So I think this is going to ultimately be good for the American people. Having said that, American people are losing their jobs. There are certain groups, such as veterans, such as the American Indians, who are being affected by some of these cuts that may not be proportionate to what they're supposed to be receiving. And so I think that as we go along in this process, they will find their way in and hopefully do a better job of understanding that these are Americans losing their jobs. Some of them aren't coming to work, but others are doing their jobs and have been for a long time, letting somebody go.
So I want you to answer something very definitively, Congressman, because this is one of those things that come up. Have you subjugated your role as a congressman to oversight on Elon Musk?
No, absolutely not. I'm on the Appropriations Committee. No money is spent unless it comes out of the Congress. What happens after that is a question. So, no, we haven't given up our oversight job, but not all of my job is providing oversight. I think that the president providing oversight of his own branch is a remarkable thing never before seen. So he's auditing his own departments as we have asked for a long, long time. They're automatically doing it. I think he and that group are going after departments within the executive branch, and they should. That way, as they find savings, then we don't have to allocate or appropriate so much money to each one of those departments, either in manning or in programs. So it's a collaborative effort. It's not one or the other.
As a conservative or fiscal conservative, do you think that they're doing it the right way?
As I said, Americans are losing their jobs right and left. And I think that if, as an employer, you want to give people some notice, you want to give them a chance to land softly and understanding that their job's going to go away, because most people have at least a car payment. Most people have expenses that must be met. And a lot of people have mortgages. So I do think there should be some lead time. I believe that they're doing that. I think in some cases, they've given you an ultimatum, show back up to work or you're fired. You've been given notice. You chose not to show up to work the next day. Do you really deserve a 2-month off ramp if you're just going to thumb your nose at your bosses? I don't think so. So there's firing for cause, and then there's firing for not really needing this bill. And I think a good boss would find a way to differentiate between the two. I don't know what they're doing in that regard. I know that Pete Hegseth has said to the DOD, answer Elon's email and tell us what you did this week. And if you don't answer that email, then that's a for cause firing that, sometimes you do something where you're not given 2 months severance pay. If you do something that you were ordered by your bosses legally to do. I was in the military. I didn't have the option to say, is that a request or an order? The captain says to you, I need you to go do this right now. How about no? Okay, that's not going to go well. The mainstream media, other than Fox, is discombobulated by the flurry of activity from this chief executive and the folks in his administration. And they're just grasping at anything to make them look bad because they can't keep up.
Since you mentioned the Department of Defense, that's something that you dedicated your life to. What are your thoughts on the new hire, Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense? And what are your thoughts on how things are going with the Defense Department?
I think Pete Hegseth has the right idea for what our military is. And it's something, before I even knew who Pete Hegseth would be the nominee, I have said the military should be about promotions via merit for lethality to prevent war and then ultimately prevail very quickly and effectively if called to go into combat. And that's what his role is. It's the Deputy Secretary of Defense's job to do the programmatic, the budgeting. That's not the SecDef's job. The SecDef is just the senior civilian advisor to the president on defense issues. And he's the 30,000 foot view. Here's our mission statement: lethality and merit. That's the kind of mission statement that I can get behind, because it's 2 sentences. So I think he's doing individual videos to reach out to employees of his department and telling them what he expects from them. And he's not sending out memos. He's getting on TV and doing it. Of course, that's where he came from. He's got outstanding hair, which I'm very envious of.
Yeah.
Not all of us can make it.
So last time I had you on, sir, we talked a lot about Ukraine, and I asked you a lot of questions on Ukraine because your constituents had a lot of questions.
Yeah.
You saw the events that unfolded inside the Oval Office yesterday, and you have been a supporter of that war to keep Russia at bay. President Trump's going a completely different direction. So I want you to speak on what happened yesterday, and where do you see us going with this Ukraine war?
Well, first of all, I think that Donald Trump, if you voted for Donald Trump, you knew that he said, I'm going to end the war. He gave different timelines depending on when he was asked, but his goal is to end that war. But I agree with Senator Cruz in that Russia started it, and however this ends, Russia should pay a price and not be seen as a winner in this case. And I don't think President Trump wants to see that. I think President Zelensky didn't read the room, and as a former entertainer and a comedian, he probably should have looked around the room and say, how am I going to treat the president of the United States in his own house? And the answer is probably not to get argumentative with him and his vice president, both of whom are very adept at returning whatever criticism you may have. He should have handled that completely differently. Having said that, I think that most people believe that there is a chance to get back on task for ending this war and getting back to the mineral deal. And I've heard that from a lot of places as I came back from the district today. Everybody wants this to get back on board. And if you'll recall, in World War II, at the Tehran meeting of Stalin, Churchill, and FDR, Stalin had recently, after Operation Barbarossa, where Hitler attacked Russia, Stalin had not always been one of our allies. And most people think, when you look at Stalin, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so for allies of convenience, just to defeat Hitler. So they all got together in Tehran and they met. And it's widely known that FDR and Stalin got together and made fun of Churchill, making him so mad that he had to leave. So I think when you look at what's going on today, I support Donald Trump's efforts to win this war. I believe that in a wartime diplomacy, what you see is about 10% of what's going on. And it's like an iceberg. 10% is what you see and 90% is under the water. We've got 30 years of psychological evaluations of Vladimir Putin. Zelensky was elected. Vladimir Putin's been in power for 30 years. And somehow he's managed to stay in power. I'm not sure anybody's going to call that a democracy where your opposition ends up poisoned wherever they are or falling out of windows. You don't, or to the negotiating table. You don't say, Putin, meet Zelensky, you're equal. I don't think that you can do that and get Putin to the table because he doesn't see Zelensky in Ukraine as an equal. So I'm going to support Donald Trump's manners in which he's trying to end this war. I am going to withhold any comment other than what we saw, which was, a double facepalm, for lack of a better term. But the people that I know who are working behind the scenes, we've got a couple of former members of Congress who were involved in negotiations, who are wanting to see a good end to this conflict, that they're going to recover from this. But I think Zelensky probably got his lesson learned, and I'm sure he'll learn from it. I don't know what's going to happen. I honestly don't know. but I support President Trump in his efforts to end this war.
Well, President Zelensky ran into Corporal Vance. He did J.D. Vance. He even got a knife hand. I mean, he got the knife hand. So it was, he ran into a U.S. Marine there in that thing, and it wasn't good. And people forget that this kind of thing happened with Biden in closed doors. It was well reported that Biden lost his cool on Zelensky because of his mannerisms, but
yeah, there's a cultural difference here. I mean, every country has its own culture. Every ethnic group has their own manner in which to deal with things, and he badly misread it. But when you're on TV in somebody's home, you don't insult the host. And so I'm curious to see what the landing party was like when he got back to Kyiv, and everybody said, "How'd I do?" He said, "How'd I do?" And everybody's going, "I'm sorry, we didn't. That didn't turn out the way you hoped." It does need to come to an end, and I think that most people understand that Putin can't be seen to win in this event, but it does need to come to an end, and that's what Ted Cruz said yesterday.
What do you think about the EU's response to everything that happened yesterday? Because you followed world events so closely, and you've been part of history and world events, as have I. So what do you think about the way NATO is handling this and how they're proceeding forward with it?
I would separate NATO from the individual nations. We want them to stand up for Ukraine. We want them to take a bigger role in their own defense in Europe. We want them to spend more on their GDP so we don't have to. We want them to provide for their own collective defense and get out of business deals with Vladimir Putin that provides all their natural gas and their energy. And this is a big wake-up call for Europe. And Donald Trump has a real gift for making them understand you've been living on the cheap, especially Germany. Now, I will say the exception to that are the Baltics, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, who are spending at least 4% each. Granted, that's not as big a amount as we are, but we're spending 3%. They're spending 4%. Poland's spending 5%. Poland and the Baltics understand what Russia is capable of. When you kidnap hundreds of thousands of children from Ukraine, if you look up the definition of genocide in the dictionary, Russia has done that to Ukraine. That's a genocide. So that's the same as not being done by Ukraine. Russia's 4 times bigger than Ukraine. They can provide more people, and they're partnered with China. Russia is partnered with China. China is providing money, and they're providing material to Russia. So that's a big partner to have helping you out. So this does need to come to an end. It's a terrible loss of life, but there is one aggressor here, and it's Vladimir Putin.
As a student of history, you know how Russia fights wars. They fight wars as a
dirty
of attrition. They have plenty of people to keep throwing. They throw out millions like it's the thing to do, and Ukraine doesn't have that.
Ukrainians value, the Western world values individual lives. Russia never has. You can go back hundreds of years to Russia. They don't value individuals. They value the motherland, and whatever they have to throw. And they did it in World War II. They did it in the Operation Barbarossa against the Germans. They would literally, if there was a minefield, instead of clearing it with tanks like we did with chains attached to the front, they would march their people, their men arm in arm across the field until the field was clear, killing hundreds, if not thousands. So they killed 10 million. Stalin killed 10 million Russians in World War II. Other than those he sent to the front. He sent them to the gulags and killed them. So the Russians are the Russian that in that they don't value individual lives.
So one of the things that, and getting a little closer to home on here, we've talked a lot about the border, and you have been very clear on what you'd like to see on the border and what has happened in the border, and you've talked to your constituents about it. President Trump came in office, we're at the lowest crossing ever in the history of ever. And you have workplace enforcements, you have people crying, you got a spectacle from the mainstream media. It's been something else. What are your thoughts on how we're handling the border, how we're handling deportations? And then there was an American killed by the cartel. And I mean, now you have Trump flying U-2 spy planes by the border. I mean, I don't know if those confirmed, but I heard those reports. And you have different things happening. Talk to me about what you've seen as far as the border and what you'd like to see going forward.
Well, the Trump effect is that saying we're going to handle the border seriously and we're going to execute 25% tariffs on Mexico unless they help take care of our border with us. You've seen 3 times fewer border encounters in January of 25 than you did in January of 24. 3 times fewer, a total of 61,465, whereas a year ago it was 176,195. Designating the cartels as terrorist organizations, that's going a long way. I am not privy to classified operations occurring at the border, but once that declaration was made on January 20th, we carry out operations all over the world that are classified that the American public won't hear about until many, many months later. 29 cartel leaders were just extradited to the United States. The pressure of tariffs, which Mexico, only 1.5% of our economic engine is affected by Mexico. 30% of theirs is. Can they afford a 25% tariff on their? No, they cannot. Donald Trump is saying, holding their feet to the fire and saying, you need to fix this. And I fully believe that they will. And so you're seeing an incredible effect on the border. We are also discussing with China the fact that they're making billions of dollars from the chemicals that they sell to the cartels to make fentanyl that's killing 70,000 Americans every year. So fentanyl alone is 70,000 Americans. If you include drug overdoses, that's 100,000 every year. So the fentanyl is a poison. Most people aren't addicted to fentanyl and then dying. They're getting poisoned immediately and dying from it. That's the same number we lost to World War II. I'll continue to trot that number out. But China's making billions off the fentanyl trade. And I'm pretty sure that behind closed doors, they're getting a little of this because he knows Xi Jinping controls everything in that country. And if we don't have to worry about the battlefield, if our men and women who can serve on the front lines or in our law enforcement in the United States are dying at the rates unheard of since World War II. We've got a great foreign policy team in Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz, who served here and was a Green Beret. And I'm sure that they're doing what they need to do to keep the American people safe.
Congressman, do you support military force against the cartels?
Yeah, I have for years. I have said military force. I don't think you'll see the 82nd Airborne Division jumping in from a C-17. I think you'll see us working with the Mexican government and their military and their law enforcement to find places where we might find them and very quietly extradite them or take other actions that doesn't require a big piece of weaponry.
Yeah. Now, a completely different subject on this one. The big, beautiful bill that was passed by Congress. Before we get into that, one of your constituents had asked, why did you vote for continuing resolutions when they funded, and this was their words, Biden priorities?
Well, first of all, government shutdowns are expensive. They cost more to start up the government than you save when you shut it down. People think, let's say the government shuts down for a month. Do you get a month of savings from the government not being in operation? No, you just missed 2 paychecks for our military, our border patrol, who are protecting American citizens, which is, as I've said, job one of the U.S. government. It's the state government with DPS. It's the county government with the sheriff, and it's the municipal government with the police department. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is protection of people. Now, there's a lot going on. The budget resolution that passed last week is not a CR. The budget resolution last week said the top line for the reconciliation, that is the one big beautiful bill that will deal with border control and the tax cuts. So there's 3 things going on right now. One is fiscal year 25 spending, which we haven't passed anything for. That funding runs out March 14th. There is no resolution to that. We have 7 legislative days until that time runs out, unless we add days to the calendar. Okay. It says, here's what the majority of the members of Congress, of the House only, agree is the top line. Okay. So that's a resolution. Then you have the fiscal year 26 spending bills, which we will be working on soon. But right now we don't have a top line for fiscal year 25. So we don't even know what that number is. So we're halfway through a year of spending. Now, why did we vote for CRs? A majority of the Republicans did vote for the CRs. A government shutdown is not good. Troops miss their paycheck if it's done at the wrong time. And so you know, everybody has an opinion about CRs. I can't promise that I always vote for them, and I can't promise them that I will vote. I can't promise either way. I haven't seen one for the one that starts through the rest of the fiscal year. A year-long continuing resolution will lead to a 1% cut in defense spending. And it will be under Joe Biden's budget. We have the House, the Senate, and the White House now. We should be passing the fiscal year 25 bills like we did last time. Otherwise, you're getting Biden's. Additionally, all the weapons systems that our troops depend on, plus a 15% pay raise. If we don't pass the defense spending bill, they don't get the raise. So the CRs are to be taken individually. They're all different. But as I said before, a lot of people say, just shut it down, burn it down. You don't save any money. You just don't get the work done. So if we stop work on an interstate highway for 2 weeks, and you're down to 1 lane instead of 4, those people are going to get paid on the backside who didn't work for a month, but the work will not have gotten done. We want to get those 12 appropriations bills across the floor, though that is the goal. But if you're not paying your troops while they're in the high seas of the South China Sea, or they're patrolling the line on the 38th parallel with North Korea, and by the way, it is a flat out lie that people get paid by banks if the government shut down, if troops get paid by the banks. No, they don't. It's an advance, and it's only in a few cases. So I've heard some of my colleagues saying that. Either they're ignorant or they're lying, and I'll tell them that to their faces.
Yeah. Well, you don't get a, I can attest, you don't get a paycheck. That's
Nope.
when it doesn't pass, you don't get a paycheck. And then, not everybody's sitting there just doing nothing. There's some people keeping the most dangerous people off the streets. And,
Yeah.
and
Border
and
Patrol,
they don't get
DEA, and the
paychecks.
troops. Job number one, you're going to hurt our troops, our Border Patrol, and the DEA. That doesn't make any sense. But we need to at least spend, in this next bill, we need to at least address defense starts, because we got a lot of great programs that are going to keep Americans safe and provide for our warfighters that we need to continue to pay for. It's the military loses $2 billion a month in its DR. So they're losing $2 billion a month right now.
Right. There's something a complaint that you see online from constituents in your area about this budget bill that just went, the budget framework, the big, beautiful bill, about us being fiscal conservatives, and this thing is going to raise the national debt, and it's going to do this and it's going to do that. Is there a situation where you see yourself not voting for the final product? Do you get another vote on it? What are you looking for when this thing is all said and done?
Too soon to tell, other than I can just, like what I said before, is the Senate has different priorities than the House does. And so let's address the tax cuts real quick. Folks have said, well, if you don't pay for them, then, it's going to raise the debt. Well, those tax cuts have been in effect since 2017 when Donald Trump passed them, and Kevin Brady from Texas was the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. So we're living under those tax cuts right now. Our prosperity and our humming economy are doing great because of that. If those tax cuts are allowed to expire, we will have presided over the largest single tax increase in American history of $4.5 trillion. It's not. And so what they will do is they will say that spending money doesn't have a cost, but tax cuts do. That doesn't make much sense. So then you've got the CBO scoring, which is a whole different ballgame, which we don't have time to deal with today.
Okay.
But we have a unique opportunity to really do some good work. And the House, the Senate, the White House, next year we should pass 12 appropriations bills signed by the president that cuts our spending, that provides for our military, that provides for our veterans, and yet brings down the bottom line and deals with our runaway debt. We have a unique opportunity here, and we have an opportunity for fiscal year 25 too. I understand it, but I want you to know, and I want the constituents to know, that defense of the American people is job number one. That is job number one. And I think most people would say, whatever it costs, in order to prevent war, we need the best. We need 5% of GDP spending. And I think there's a consensus up here that we need that. And I'd like to remind people that of every dollar spent by the federal government, 70 cents is already spoken for, and that's called mandatory spending, meaning the Appropriations Committee doesn't look at it. We deal with 30 cents of every dollar, and 15 cents of every dollar is defense spending. So where else are you going to cut $36 trillion? The 70% that's mandatory is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And where are you going to cut that? But 60 years ago, it was 30% mandatory, 70% discretionary. So Congress had a much bigger say in where all that money was spent. We don't have that say anymore. So there's only so much you can take out of Hyde if 50% of the discretionary budget is defense. And arguably there needs to be more. So we're in a conundrum. The tax cuts and the growing economy that we're going to have by energy dominance, by drilling all over the place, by being an energy net exporter, our economy is going to grow, and we're going to get more tax revenues from that, and we're going to start to dig ourselves out. It's not going to take 36 trillion, but that's going to take time.
I appreciate your support of the show, sir. I really do. Now now this is kind of the fun part. This is where I want you to talk about what you've been doing for the district, some of the legislation you've been part of, some of the things you'd like to see, maybe some of the selections for academies and kind of those good stuff. Because I saw that you went to City Hall in Midlothian and checked that out.
Well, I got to talk to my first midshipman. I won't say who because there's a lot of folks waiting to hear, but we did get our first midshipman. That is the one thing that I don't have to ask anybody's permission to do. There's no boat. And since I'm an Academy graduate myself, I have all Academy graduates on my Academy selection boards. And that's a very exciting time when somebody who I know, like me, since I was 7 years old, wanted to go to the Naval Academy, be a fighter pilot. That 11 years that I worked for that was a life-changing event. I really love the staff that we have in the district and have up here who are very responsive to constituent needs, because I don't need to vote on that. And there's a great deal of satisfaction that comes from finding people who do need help with the IRS, who do need help with their taxes, who do need help with various other things, and that you can help people out in a very constructive way. Julie Luce runs a great shop. She's working very hard to make sure that people's needs are taken care of. And that's what we expect. And we have the friendliest and most efficient staff doing that every day. You need help with VA benefits. You need help getting your military record. You need help with the IRS, Social Security. You need a disability rating. If you're a spouse or a caretaker of a veteran who hasn't done their disability rating, we can do that too. And then you ask their spouse, does he need any help? Does she need any help? Yes, they do. Then I'll tell that service member, do it for your family, because quite frankly, it's not about you, it's about them and them receiving the help in times where you might not be able to help yourself, that they should have a right to be able to help you and have the government do that when you sign your name on the dotted line. That's the contract the United States makes. So I love that part of the job, and no job is too small. You can always tell veterans, right? Because they're always wearing a hat. They're always wearing some kind of a veteran hat. Did you do your disability? And I won't do the hard sell, because proud men, especially men, especially Marines, there's nothing wrong with me. Oh, really? Oh, okay. How's your knee? How are your knees? Oh, my knees are killing me. How's your back? Oh, it grinds every time I turn my head. So I love that interaction out in the district. And if you see me, chances, I live in Midlothian, but I'm all over the place. So I try to travel throughout these 9 counties as much as possible. But I love doing that job. I come home on the weekends. I'm often shopping for ice cream at Brookshire's. Golden Brook is the best for me. And Brahms has the best milk. So I know how much milk costs. I know how much eggs cost. I know how much ice cream costs, and I know how much steak costs. So I'm going to go get a great steak. And then you go to the grocery store and you go, how did sirloin become $20 a pound? So,
yeah, maybe I'm going to get some milanesa. Maybe not
right.
The big steak.
Looks like I'm
not the big steak. Yeah.
And so I want to invite everybody to come up and see me in Washington, D.C. This is your capital. This is your office. This does not belong to me. It's not my seat. It is yours. And we love it when people come for a tour. In fact, I was on the Southwest plane coming in, and I used to, fly for them. And I handed the flight attendant a card and said, you guys have an overnight that's long and you want to tour the Capitol, come on by. And so I think Madison already took them on a tour. You'll see all the wonderful pictures that my wife will let me have at home. My I Love Me walls over here with all my aviation stuff. Those 2 pictures are of my dad, one on the ranch and one at the Marriott Ranch in Virginia. And believe it or not, you raise this up, the sun's right behind us. The special treat is for people who come from the district is this 100-year-old building, which I don't think these windows have been repaired ever. We go out the window out here in the main office, raise the window, you get out on the balcony or on the roof, and you go and walk and you can overlook the Capitol Dome, and it's really quite special. The east stairs they're on the east side of the building. I get to go up there every day, and I recognize that there's a finite number of times that I can do that. Someday, at some time, this point will end for a kid from the Ellzey Ranch, from the Panhandle of Texas, to think that I could go and get to do all these wonderful things, fly the best jets any nation has ever built, in the F-14 Tomcat, the Super Hornet, on the most powerful ships on the planet, 90,000-pound aircraft carriers, of which I think I've done deployments on 4.5 years at sea, and then be able to get elected and wear this pin to serve the people of Texas in Congress. What a remarkable place. So if you get on social media and you start scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and there's something bad, it puts you in a bad mood, put that stuff down. Go outside and look out on this beautiful day. Go be with family. Go be with people that you love and you care about, and just know that I'm working really hard for you. And there's a couple of things that I rely on every day. Number one is my scripture and my quiet time in the morning, my prayers, because I can't, obviously can't do this on my own. And occasionally type A males think they can, but they can't. Churchill, Wit and Wisdom is one of my favorite books. So if I'm having a rotten day, I'll just find one, and he'll say something that's hilarious or something very poignant or something great about the United States. And then there's the Daily Stoic, which is always very timely whenever I'm having a problem and thinking I'm going to get bothered by something. So I only concern myself with things that I can affect. If I have no ability to change them, then I can't let it bother me. The Daily Stoic is something that I read throughout the day too. And then, reading new books, a lot about Eisenhower and D-Day. So there's always something to read up here that'll inspire you to understand that this incredible office that I get to sit in is truly an honor, and it's finite. So I love to get to work and talk with you and with people on the street. So don't be shy. Come up and see me. That's my job. I'm doing it 24/7.
I can't wait to visit. I've been wanting to visit for a while, and I definitely can't wait to see that and be there.
We'll get you. We can get people tours of the White House. We can get you tickets to the top of the Washington Monument, which for 11 years was closed after an earthquake. Most people probably don't remember it, but you can get in the Washington Monument, take the elevator to the top. Obviously, a great tour of the Capitol. Get you out on the roof here. We might have some ice cream in the freezer, some dilly bars from Dairy Queen, maybe. If you ask for one, you'll get one. But I love this job. I love the opportunity I get. It takes me away from my family, my young family, who I love, but they understand that I'm trying to do good things up here. And these are difficult times, but Ecclesiastes 1:9 says there's nothing new under the sun. And I still think we're the bright, shining city on the hill, and I still think our best days are ahead of us. So that's what I'm working for every day. And I know this administration is too. There's no microwavable way to do our republic. And sometimes it's tough, and you're going to see things and people lash out in ways that are unbecoming. I'm not that guy. So if you're looking for me to bash another human being, certainly another American, you're not going to see that happen. So we like to work quietly and as a quiet professional, as you and I did in the military, and honoring our veterans and those who didn't make it home because they're watching.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much for coming on. Now, I will tell you, I would love for you, when you get back in the district, I would love to take you to breakfast. And then the other thing is that the Veterans Court in Ellis County is really ramping up and doing well. I actually mentoring one vet right now, and there's others. They're really, trying to help veterans out. I would love for you to get a chance to check that out. There's Master Guns running that, and Judge Wallace, and they're doing great things with that. I would love for you to check that out when you get back to this.
When we get off, and I got to go here in a minute to another meeting, but as we conclude this, Madison's listening. She's holding up the power cord. It's really quite funny. So if you'll indulge me, and then I'll send it to you so you can see just how we run things in here. But she's been doing a great job. Thank you, Madison.
Well, you take care, sir. I won't take up any more of your time. I will keep you in prayer and keep fighting a good fight.
God bless you, my friend. Keep your faith in God and hope in man. It's all going to be okay.